Hey everybody, welcome to the Jayda InStitches show. We have another basket storage solution for you today. We are going to make a cubic storage basket. This basket works out to be 9 inches by 9 inches by 9 inches, or 10 by 10 by 10, depending on how thick your yarn is, the hook you use, and of course your stitch tension. This is a 3 strands of yarn held together basket project, just like our other two, to make a nice stiff fabric. This basket is great for a cubic storage shelf. So a lot of you asked for a basket that would fit into a storage shelf with like a big square sort of shelving areas in it. But of course you can put this on another shelf too. I've got a shelving unit next to me here, which I think I'm going to put a couple of these baskets on. It's great for storing arts and craft supplies or clothes or toys or whatever you need. We just did a rectangular basket, which is great for smaller things, smaller spots, underneath cabinetry, or even on your desk, but this one holds a whole lot more. This is also a great project to use up more of that variegated yarn if you're not sure what to do with it. I've gone with a variegated and 2 solids today, but of course you can use whatever colors, whatever kinds of yarn you want. So let's grab our hooks, grab our yarn, we'll head on over to the craft table, and we will stitch up a cubic storage basket together. In order to make our cubic storage baskets, I'm using a 100% acrylic size 4 medium weight yarn. 3 strands held together throughout for this project, so I'm using 2 different solid colors and a pretty variegated. For each strand, you want 200 grams or 365 yards, so that's 600 grams in total for the project. You want a pair of scissors, a yarn needle with a large enough eye that you can fit all 3 strands through it at once, and the main build, we're going to use a really big hook, 10 millimeter or N or 15 in the US, not a P, or a 000 in the UK. So a nice big hook. And for a little bit of corner work near the end, you want a smaller hook. Doesn't have to be exactly the same one I'm using. 4 millimeter, 4.25, 4.5, anything in that ballpark. A nice small hook for a little bit of corner work. Doesn't matter the size, but you do want a smaller hook. And if you're not already subscribed to our channel, please take a moment to hit that button and the bell so you never miss another episode. And once you've got all of your supplies together, we can get started. We're going to begin with all 3 strands held together. We're using all 3 strands together throughout, so treat them all like one big thick piece of yarn. We're going to begin with a slip knot. And to begin, we're going to chain 19. 19 chains to begin.
Visit our shop and purchase a pattern. You'll help support our show, and we'll put a link to our shop in the description box down below.
Once you have 19 chains, try not to twist your foundation chain row. We're going to use the single crochet stitch. So we're going to skip the first chain from the hook, and remember those 3 strands together make a nice big thick stitch. So we're skipping the first chain, we're working into the second chain, we're going to single crochet. And you're going to single crochet in each stitch all the way back to the beginning. Try to make sure you're getting all 3 of your strands held together while you're single crocheting. But if for some reason one of your strands sort of slips out of your fingers or it misses a stitch, don't panic, it will not unravel. Just pick it up and keep going. At the end of row 1 and at the end of every row in this main part of the basket, you're going to have 18 stitches. Every row is going to end with a chain 1 and a turn. That chain 1 is your turning chain. You don't use it, you skip it, but you need it for the build of the fabric. Always begin in the first stitch, skip the chain. You're going to single crochet in every single stitch all the way across to the end. So you'll still have 18 stitches in each row. You're going to chain 1, turn, single crochet all the way back, and you're going to keep doing that until you've got 54 rows. So 5-4, 54 rows of single crochet. Once you've single crocheted 54 rows, you can fasten off And take a moment to weave in those tails underneath the stitches back and forth across that last row. Next, we want to add some side pieces. So we're going to do exactly the same thing on both sides of our basket. You're going to take a couple of safety pins or stitch markers or even a little bit of yarn, and you're going to count in 18 rows from one end and mark the edge, and count in 18 rows from the other end and mark the edge. We're going to single crochet the 18 rows in between those two stitch markers. So you're going to grab all 3 of your yarns. We're still holding 3 strands together. We're going to make a slip knot and we're going to join our yarn in the space at the edge of the 18th stitch down from one end, and it's the same thing on one side as it is on the other. We're going to join our yarn with a slip stitch, chain 1, and single crochet in the same place that you joined. And if you just pull up a little bit, you can see that space. Now you're going to single crochet into the edge of each of those 18 rows all the way up to your stitch marker. So you want 18 stitches in total, and you're just going to look for the space at the edge of the row. So you don't want to try and grab this, you don't have to grab stitches or loops or anything. Just find the space. Some of them are small, some of them are large, and you're going to work 18 stitches along the edge of the middle of your base piece of fabric. You should have 18 stitches, including the single crochet that you started with. So we chained 1 and single crocheted into the same stitch. Make sure you count that one. 18 stitches across. You're going to chain 1 and turn at the end of every row, and you're going to single crochet back and forth across this little side piece until you have 18 rows. So this is row 1, that row that we joined to the main piece of fabric with. Each row will have 18 stitches in it. You'll chain 1 and turn at the end of each row. You're going to single crochet back and forth until you have 18 rows in total. Once you've crocheted 18 rows, and every single row will have 18 stitches in it, so you count the first row where you attached your yarn and worked across the side of the main piece of fabric, that's row 1, and then rows 2 through 18. Make sure you have 18 of them. You can trim your yarn, fasten off, and weave in those tails back and forth across the stitches in that last row. Then you want to flip your piece over and do exactly the same thing on the other side. So you're going to count in 18 rows from one end, mark it, count in 18 rows from the other end, mark it, and then work those 18 rows of single crochet back and forth until you have the exact same shape and size panel on the other side. We now have a piece of fabric that looks like a big X. So there's our main piece of fabric, and there's the 2 pieces that are equal that have come off each side right in the very middle of our main piece of fabric. And all 4 of these now flaps that we have kind of coming out of the centerpiece should all be exactly the same height. They're all 18 inches tall, which is great because now we're going to start seaming up our edges. So you're going to take the first 2 flaps and you're going to sort of hold them together. You can pin them in place if you feel you need to, but what you're doing is you're going to be working through the edge of each of those 18 rows, both pieces held together. We're going to single crochet all the way up that edge to make a nice firm seam, and we want to make sure that our edges, our tops, are nice and flush. So here's where our small hook comes into play. We're going to use a single strand of yarn now. You can use whichever one you want, whether it's a color you like or perhaps you have one with a lot more of the yarn left in the ball. Grab whatever yarn you want. We're going to join our yarn with a slip stitch down at the bottom here. So we're going to put our hook right through the first set of spaces along the very bottom of that first set of rows. And just like we did when we were adding the side panels, you're just going to be working the spaces at the edge of the rows as opposed to trying to pick up pieces of a stitch. So we're going to join with a slip stitch, chain 1, And through that same set of holes, you can see it there if I sort of pull up on everything, you're going to work 2 single crochets in that same place. So you might have to pull up a little bit on your yarn to get that single crochet. Try to make it nice and tight because you want a nice firm seam. So that's the first edge of the first set of rows. You're going to move up to the next hole, or the next sort of space at the end of a couple of rows. Make sure you're going through the whole piece of fabric, and you're going to work 2 single crochets through that little set of spaces, right over the edge of the second set of rows. Find the next set and work 2 single crochets through that set of spaces. You're going to work 2 single crochet through each of the 18 spaces or row ends all the way up your seam, so that you'll end up with something that looks like this. You've got this nice little row of single crochets running up the edge. This will eventually end up on the inside of our basket. So don't worry about it if it looks a little messy. But if you're getting 2 single crochet through those edge spaces together, it should look pretty neat and tidy. You should have something that looks like this. That's the first seam almost completed. The last 2 single crochet you're going to work are going to be right through that top edge of each of the undersides of those foundation chain rows, or the tops of the single crochets at the very end. So 2 single crochets to finish. Snip your yarn, fasten off, and grab your yarn needle, and you can weave that tail in back and forth across those stitches that ran up the inside of your seam. So that's one seam all finished. There's the single crochet running up the spine of it. Now you're going to go ahead and do the other 3 seams. Take care to make sure that you're always working on the outside and you haven't accidentally flipped it. So if you have to, make sure you refer back to your first seam. You want to make sure that you're working along the outside edge of all of those seams, so that when we flip it right side out, all of these little single crocheted spines will be on the inside of your box. Once you've done all 4 of your seams, you can now flip your basket inside out. I like to start with taking a very little corner and poking it through to the inside with my middle finger. And I'm going to do that with all 4 of them. And then I'm going to very gently flip it inside out, or right side out. Then you can go around and squeeze your seams. You'll see that nice little bit of seam stitching showing through. Squeeze your seams, and that will help give your basket a little bit more definition. Before we finish our basket, we're going to make some handles. So we're going to make 2 of these. We're back to using 3 strands held together and our big hook. We're going to start with a long tail and a slip knot. So you want a long tail because you're going to use that to sew down one side of your handle to the basket. Next, you're going to chain 11 to begin. Once you have 11 chains, we're going to use the half double crochet stitch. We're going to skip the first chain from the hook. We're going to half double crochet into the second chain, and we're going to half double crochet into each chain all the way back. We'll have 10 stitches at the end of this row. Once you're back to the beginning, you'll have 10 stitches. You want to leave yourself a nice long tail. You can fasten off, and then we're going to weave this tail, the long one, all the way back underneath some of these slanted facing loops all the way to the other end. So we don't want to pull it out of alignment, but what you're going to do is you're going to thread up your yarn needle, and you're going to weave the tails underneath these little horizontal loops because these ones sit out a little bit from behind, so they're easy to get your needle under. And you're going to just tug it all the way through. Try not to pull too hard because you don't want to accidentally pull your handle out of alignment. And you're just going to continue to weave those tails, the long ones, underneath those slanted stitches until that's completely out the other end of your handle. So now you've got a sewing tail at one end and a sewing tail at the other end. You want 2 of these handles, and then we're going to go ahead and sew them on either side of our basket. You can pick any one of the sides you want to put your first basket handle on. Just remember the other one is going to go on the exact opposite side of your basket. We're going to put our basket handles on somewhere in the middle, so you want to sort of eyeball it, find the middle of that side, and you're going to sew it 1 row down. So miss that top row from the top edge and then line up the top of your basket handle with the second row. You can pin it into place or just hold it like I'm doing. Thread up those long tails on either side, whichever side you're on, and just sew through the top facing loops of the basket and the whole edge of the handle. You want to make sure this is on nice and tight, especially if you're going to be hauling around a lot of stuff fairly frequently, or if a little person is going to have it in their room and they tend to be kind of rough on their things. So go through the stitches at least twice, maybe go back and forth a couple times just to make sure that that handle is really on there. And once you're satisfied that it's on nice and tight, you can bring your sewing yarns through to the inside of your basket. You can make a small knot. Make sure it's nice and tight up against the back side of your basket. And then you can just weave those tails in back and forth across the inside of those stitches on the inside of your basket a few times until you're pretty sure they're not going to come out, and you can trim whatever's left over. Then you're going to sew up the other side of your handle, and then you're going to put the other handle on the other side of your basket. Once you've got both your basket handles on, you can give your basket a little bit of a tugging and a pressing just to make sure that you put it back into shape after you were probably manhandling it quite a bit while you were putting on your handles. You can kind of tug at the bottom corner, sort of the edge at the bottom where it bends. Make sure you press your seams back into place. And there you go, 1 cubic basket. That's approximately 9 inches by 9 inches by 9 inches. And there you go, 1 cubic storage basket for all of your storage requirements, and a great way to use up some of that pretty variegated yarn too. We hope you enjoyed making this basket along with us this week, and we will see you soon here on the Jayda InStitches show. Until then, stay safe, stay crafty, and have an awesome week, everybody. Bye!
Hi everybody, Mr. InStitches here. Thank you for watching today. Here are some of our other videos you might be interested in. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe.